Let me ask you something real quick. What if everything you've been doing to get closer to her is actually the reason she keeps pulling away? What if the things you were taught about love and attraction and how women work are so fundamentally backwards that the more effort you put in, the further behind you fall? Because here's the truth. Most men are operating off a completely broken manual they were handed as boys, and nobody ever corrected it. They were taught, be nice, be consistent, show up, be available, tell her how you feel, and she'll love you for it. And then they wonder why the guy doing none of that walks in and she can't stop thinking about him. Olivia OS here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going in deep because I want to dismantle the most common and most damaging things men get wrong about women. Not to embarrass you, not to shame you, but because real clarity is the only thing that actually changes outcomes. I'm talking about the psychological blind spots that cost men years of confusion, frustration, and connection that could have actually worked. If you've ever felt like you're doing everything right and still losing, pay close attention, because this one is going to shift how you see everything. Let's get into it. Number 1, she needs to feel something, not just hear something. The number 1 mistake men make is believing that communication is the same as connection. So they talk more, they explain more, they over-text, they send the paragraphs, they check in constantly, they say all the right things, and they wonder why she still feels distant. Here's the psychology behind what's actually happening. Women are wired to process emotion through what's called affective resonance. It means they don't just hear your words, they feel the energy underneath them. And when those two things don't match, the words become noise. You can say, I care about you 100 times, but if your body language is closed, if your energy is anxious, if you're seeking reassurance every time you say it, she doesn't feel cared for. She feels pressured. Contrast that with a man who says very little, but whose presence makes her feel grounded, safe, and seen. That man doesn't have to convince her of anything. She already knows. The error men make is outsourcing their emotional communication entirely to words, because words feel safe. They're explainable. They're defensible. But attraction doesn't live in the explainable. It lives in the felt. So the correction here is not to talk less necessarily. It's to mean more when you do speak. To build a life and a presence that carries weight, so that when you do say something, it lands with gravity, not with desperation. Start asking yourself not, what am I saying, but what is she feeling when she's around me? Because those are two very different questions, and only one of them matters. Number 2, mystery is not about withholding information. It's about having a life worth being curious about. A lot of guys hear mystery and they think, okay, I won't tell her everything. I'll be vague. I'll keep her guessing. And then they come across as emotionally unavailable or just kind of weird. That's not mystery. That's performance. Real mystery doesn't come from what you don't say. It comes from the fact that you are genuinely living a life that is bigger than the pursuit of her attention. When a man has goals he's actively chasing, workouts he doesn't miss, friendships he actually invests in, and a standard for how he spends his time, she has to earn a place in that life. And earning something creates desire. Think about it this way. A woman is far more intrigued by a man whose schedule she has to fit into than a man who clears his entire day the moment she says she might be free. The first man communicates subconsciously. I have a life I've built, and I'm inviting you into it. The second man communicates, I have been waiting for you to determine whether my day has value. Behavioral psychology calls this the scarcity principle, and it works not because you're being manipulative, but because genuine investment in your own life is inherently attractive. So the move here is simple. Stop trying to seem mysterious and start actually building something you care about. Because a man who is genuinely driven, genuinely passionate, genuinely full is interesting by default. She doesn't need you to be vague. She needs you to be worth wondering about. Number 3, she's not testing you to be difficult, she's testing you because she needs to know you're safe. This is one that so many men get completely wrong, and it costs them deeply. A woman goes quiet, she pulls back, she throws you a challenge, she says something that doesn't fully add up, and men immediately interpret it as manipulation or games. But here's what's really happening from a psychological standpoint. Women are neurologically wired to assess safety and consistency before they open emotionally. And they do this through what behavioral researchers call partner evaluation testing. It is not a conscious strategy most of the time. It is instinctual. She's not trying to make your life hard. She's trying to figure out if you're going to collapse under pressure, if your confidence is real or just a front, if you are the same man in a tense moment that you are when everything is smooth. And here's the critical part. How you respond to her tests tells her everything she needs to know. The man who gets defensive, who over-explains, who panics, or who goes cold, fails immediately. Not because he said the wrong thing, but because his reaction confirmed he is not stable enough to hold her. The man who stays calm, who doesn't need to prove himself, who can smile through the friction and remain grounded, that man passes without trying. So, the next time she does something that makes you want to react, take a breath. Ask yourself, is she being unreasonable? Or is she just watching how I handle pressure? Because to her, those aren't two different questions. They're the same test. Number 4, overavailability is not love. It's anxiety wearing love's clothes. Let me be direct with you. A man who is always available, who responds instantly, who revolves his schedule around her, who never says no, who shows up every time she calls, is not demonstrating devotion. He is demonstrating that he has nothing else going on, and she feels that. There is a concept in attachment psychology called anxious pursuit, and what it does is create the opposite of what the man intends. The more he leans in, the more she pulls back. Not because she is cruel, but because her nervous system interprets his constant availability as need. And need without strength is not attractive. It's suffocating. Real devotion looks different. It is consistent, but not constant. It is present when it counts, but not hovering. It is predictable in character, but not predictable in schedule. The highest value signal a man can send is that he is choosing her inside a life that is already full, not orbiting her inside a life that is empty. This does not mean you should be cold or distant or play games. It means you should have a mission, have standards, have things you won't cancel on, have mornings that belong to your growth before they belong to her. Because the man whose presence feels like a gift because it isn't guaranteed is the man she thinks about between visits, and the man she never has to miss is the man she eventually stops noticing. Number 5, she does not want a yes man. She wants a man she cannot walk over. Here's one of the biggest myths men have been sold, that agreement equals harmony, and harmony equals attraction. So they go along, they don't push back, they validate every opinion, they apologize before there's even a conflict, and they wonder why she loses respect for them quietly over time. The psychology here is rooted in something called dominance hierarchy signaling. A woman's attraction system is wired to respond to a man who has his own viewpoint, who will hold it under pressure, and who is not emotionally destabilized by her disapproval. When you agree with everything she says, you are not being kind. You are communicating that her approval is worth more to you than your own judgment, and that signals low value, whether you intend it to or not. The men women find most compelling are the ones who challenge them a little. Not aggressively, not condescendingly, but from a place of genuine conviction. When you say, "Actually, I see that differently," or "That's not how I'd handle it," and you hold the frame calmly while she pushes back, you are sending a signal that goes straight past logic and into instinct. It says, "This man knows who he is." And a man who knows who he is the most stabilizing and attractive thing a woman can encounter in today's dating landscape, where most men are shape-shifting to match her preferences in real time. So, the correction is this: have opinions you'll defend, have standards you won't negotiate, and have enough self-respect to let her be wrong sometimes without needing to fix it. That is not arrogance. That is identity. And identity is what she's looking for. Number 6, emotional withdrawal from her does not mean she has lost interest. It might mean she is protecting herself. This one is misread constantly. She goes quiet, she stops initiating, she becomes less affectionate, and the man immediately concludes she's losing interest or she's talking to someone else. And sometimes that's true. But sometimes what's actually happening is that she has opened up before and it didn't feel safe. Maybe something shifted in the dynamic. Maybe he reacted badly to something vulnerable she shared. Maybe he was inconsistent and she learned not to count on it. Women have an emotional self-protection mechanism that researchers describe as preemptive withdrawal. It's the heart closing slightly before it gets hurt again. And the man who sees this and panics and pushes harder for reassurance confirms exactly what she feared, that she cannot be soft around him without it costing her something. The man who sees the withdrawal and responds with calm consistency, who doesn't punish her for it, who doesn't beg for access but stays present and steady. That man is the one who slowly earns the walls back down. So, before you decide she's checked out, ask a harder question. Have I given her a reason to feel safe staying open? Because sometimes her distance is not disinterest. It is a very quiet question about whether you can handle her when she's not performing for you. Number 7. Attraction is not built in the big moments, it's maintained in the small ones. Men spend enormous energy trying to win women with grand gestures, the trips, the surprises, the lavish dates. And don't get me wrong, those things have a place, but they miss what actually sustains attraction over time. It is the small, calibrated moments of consistency. The way you handle a stressful situation without falling apart. The way you keep a commitment you didn't have to keep. The way you remember what she told you 3 weeks ago and bring it up without being asked. The way you handle the boring Tuesdays with the same energy you brought on the first exciting Saturday. There is a concept in relationship psychology called micro-affirmations, the tiny, repeated signals of care, reliability, and attention that compound over time into something a woman feels deeply bonded to. And most men completely undervalue this. They think she should be impressed by what they can do in the spotlight, and they grow lazy in the in-between. But she is living in the in-between. And what you do when it's not exciting, when there's nothing to prove, when no one is watching, that is the actual data she is using to decide how safe she feels with you. So here's the reframe. Stop asking, how do I impress her? Start asking, How do I show up consistently? Because women do not fall in love with the peak moments. They fall in love with the pattern. Let me bring this home. What 99% of men get wrong about women is not a technique issue. It's a perspective issue. They've been taught that attraction is something you do to a woman, when the truth is, it's something you embody for yourself. The man who communicates through presence, not just words, who builds a life worth being curious about, who stays grounded under pressure, who chooses her without needing her, who holds his identity without apology, who shows up in the quiet moments with the same quality he brings to the big ones, that man does not chase attraction. Attraction comes to him. And that shift from chasing to becoming is the entire game. Olivia OS here. I hope this one hit differently. Go back, watch it again, because some of what I said today takes more than one listen to fully land. Smash that like button if this gave you something real. Subscribe because we go deeper every single week, and I will catch you in the next one. Cheers!